What happens with the investigation into Pauline Pusser's death if her autopsy report comes back as inconclusive? Stick around and find out. Okay, a lot of people have been asking what happens if Pauline Pusser's autopsy report comes back as being inconclusive? Well, the answer to that is that is only one small part of the overall investigation. There's so much more that says volumes about this case. So, not everything hinges on this one aspect of the overall investigation. For instance, look at what two ladies heard just shortly before Pauline was murdered. They overheard Buford threaten Pauline's life. Now, true, both of them are gone now, but that story was published in a book by one of the ladies who heard the threat that Buford made against Pauline. So that's an important piece. But again, that is only one small piece. And you have to see how it ties into other parts of the investigation. Now, you also have to think about the young lady that Buford said that he wanted to have a long term relationship with. Now, when this young lady asked, "What about Pauline?" Buford's response was said to be, "Pauline won't be a problem much longer." And you have to question what that meant. Now, it's ironic that just a short time later, Pauline is dead. Now, should that be a part of the investigation? I believe it should, as that young lady is still alive and could offer good information. Now, the fact that Buford wanted to have a long term relationship with a woman other than Pauline, that establishes a motive for him wanting to get rid of Pauline. Also, there at the Old Hickory Grill, Pauline had threatened to expose his corruption to the TBI. That would also be motive for her death. What follows now is Dennis and Johnny. They had been following Buford just hours before the alleged ambush. Now, of course, this is something that they did on occasions. Selmer was a small town, McNairy was a small county, not much to do. So, one of the pastimes that they and others had were to follow Buford around, see what he was up to. Well, that particular night, they saw Buford meet a car from Oklahoma. At least it was bearing Oklahoma tags. And they witnessed Buford getting guns from two individuals that occupied that vehicle, put them in the trunk of his car, drove away. Now, ironically, just hours later, Pauline is killed in an alleged ambush with an unidentified weapon. Another thing that's interesting to note is that just prior to the ambush, the day before, Pauline called Diane, who was staying in Memphis with Buford's sister Galia, and told her to come home. The reason being that Pauline and Buford were having problems, and she wanted Diane to be home. Now, when you look into this, you think about it. Pauline is gathering all of her kids so that she can take them with her when she leaves. She's been staying in a motel in Savannah up to this time. Levon Plunk was Pauline's best friend. and they were out together just hours before the alleged ambush. Now, Buford didn't like Levon and didn't want Pauline hanging out with her, but that night they were together. Levon knew that Pauline was getting ready to leave Buford. They'd been to some clubs. It was going to be the last time they saw each other for quite some time, so they wanted to go out and enjoy themselves. And then they went back to Buford and Pauline's residence so that Pauline could collect her children and get some personal items to take with her. When they arrived there, Pauline asked Levon to come into the house with her, and Levon refused. She was afraid that Buford would come home, find her there, and there would be problems. So she told Pauline, I'll simply park down the street a little ways. When you get ready to leave, you flash your porch lights. I'll come up with the car. We'll get the kids loaded up, get everything loaded in, and we'll be gone. Levon went down the street just a little ways, hadn't much more than parked when Buford drove by, pulled into the driveway. He goes in the house, and maybe a minute later, Levon hears a single gunshot. She's not sure what to do. She can't call her husband, Petey, because he is one of Buford's favorite and most trusted deputies. And Levon is afraid that Petey will lie to cover for Buford. She can't call the sheriff's office because Buford's dad, Carl, is going to be the one to answer the telephone. So she can't call him. She doesn't know what to do, so she goes home. And she's sitting there considering what she should be able to do if there's anybody that she can call. About that time, the telephone rings. It's her husband, Petey. And he tells her that Pauline just got killed in an ambush meant for Buford. Now, interviewing Levon Plunk was one of the most interesting conversations that I've had with anybody about Pauline's murder. Now, to dovetail into the story that Levon would tell, there's also the story that Diane would tell that she was at home that night. She heard a disturbance out in the living room and a pop. She said that she didn't know quite what to do. She was afraid of Buford, didn't want to go to the living room, but then she heard the front door open. So she looked out a window and saw Buford carrying Pauline to his car. He placed her in the front seat. He turned back, walked toward the house. Diane thought that he might be coming in to get rid of her next. And as she watched, Buford got about halfway up the sidewalk area, bent over, picked up Pauline's shoes that had fallen from her feet, took them over to the Plymouth Fury that he had placed Pauline in, took the shoes, placed them in the floorboard of the car. Then he got in the car and they drove away. Now, later, Buford would tell a story about having received a phone call somewhere around 4 a.m. Said that the caller told him that there was a disturbance at Hollis Jordan's place on 45, just about a mile north of the state line. There was a fight taking place there, and somebody needed to get down there or someone was going to get killed. Buford got ready and said that Pauline wanted to join him that morning, something she had never done before. Now, two other people would play important roles in all of this. One would be Carl Pusser, the father of Sheriff Buford Pusser. Now, he claimed that he was at the jail that night working when he received a phone call somewhere around 2 a.m. stating that there was a disturbance going on at Hollis Jordan's place on 45. Now, Carl would say he didn't dispatch anyone out because everything got kind of slow at 2 o'clock. He wanted Buford to be at home to get his rest. So he didn't call Buford. He didn't call any of the deputies. Now, this is a really strange act that a person who is a jailer and a dispatcher would make a decision like that. Now, later, according to Warden Moore, who was the county coroner, Carl called him, telling him that Buford and Pauline were in a fight at their home and they were about to kill each other. And he told Ward that he needed him to go over there. And Ward said he did. And when he arrived, Buford and Pauline were no longer there. He said that while he was in the home, he took a look around, didn't see anything really suspicious until he looked down and he saw a couple of droplets of blood on the carpet. Now, we're not talking about blood spatter like a gunshot wound would leave. We're speaking of droplets of blood, like if you had a bloodied lip or a bloodied nose, something on that order. So there wasn't much more that he could do. Now, one thing I wish I'd asked Ward when I was speaking with him is why he didn't give a statement to the TBI. Now, the fastest and by far the easiest route that Buford could have taken to get to Hollis Jordan's place was to go about 2 blocks from his home, get on Highway 64 going to Selmer, turn a left, and it's a straight drive on Highway 45 down to Hollis Jordan's place. But that's not the route he took. He took a convoluted system of roads to get down to the state line. One that had a lot of unimproved roadway. He even crossed over 2 highways to take this convoluted route when he could have turned down either. For instance, Highway 57 that went right into Eastview, but he didn't. He took a route that led him by the New Hope Church. Now you have to think about the significance of the church being on this convoluted route. Now, if you're an ambush party, how would you know to wait there? How would you know that Buford wouldn't be on 64 or 45, or that he would turn down 142, or he would turn down Highway 57? It Nothing about it makes any sense. It was just a theory floated by the TBI that there was an ambush party there at the church. There's never been any proof of it, but after that story came out, Buford rolled with it. Be sure and subscribe and hit that bell so that you'll get notifications of new videos when they're released. If you want to learn the real story of Buford Pusser, you need to get my book, Buford Pusser, The Other Story. It is full of facts and information that you don't get anywhere else that I know of. It's the story as told by the people who live their own parts in the real tale. It's full of photographs, documents, lots of interesting things to see, and it pretty well outlines everything from Buford's birth up until the time of his death, and even after that, because the family became embroiled in a lot of lawsuits over his legacy. So, again, Buford Pusser, The Other Story. It's available at both Amazon.com and eBay. Three things that are important to establish in a criminal investigation is motive, means, and opportunity. Well, we have a motive, actually two. One being that Buford wanted to have a long-term relationship with a girlfriend that he had there. It had been discussed between he and her that, Buford was married, but he told his girlfriend that Pauline would soon cease to be a problem. Then he also had the motivation that Pauline, while at the Old Hickory Grill that night when they had an argument, had threatened to report Buford's corruption. As far as means, Buford had been involved in a gun exchange there in Eastview just a few hours before the alleged ambush. Now he had possession of a couple of long guns that no one knew about. Now he was about to make his opportunity to get rid of Pauline. Now, Buford would later claim that there was an ambush party waiting for him at the New Hope Church, that he passed by the church going 45, 50 miles an hour, and that they fell in behind him, apparently without the use of their headlights, that they caught up with him in 7/10 of a mile, pulled up alongside of him, turned on their headlights, and opened fire. One shot struck Pauline in the head. Buford said that she reached over, grabbed his arm, was gasping for breath, that she was only wounded here. Now, could this be true? I know I've shown in one video where we had a car that passed by New Hope Church about 45 miles an hour with a Cadillac giving pursuit, and the Cadillac was not even close to the car representing Pusser's car by the time it reached the first ambush site. So, scientifically and mathematically, it seems impossible for Buford's story to be true just from the time and motion study. Now, Buford would go on to say that after Pauline was shot, he hit the gas. He drove 2.1 miles on down New Hope Road to the intersection of Davis Yancey and New Hope Roads. There, he stopped to check on Pauline. His story was that he started to get out of the car. He opened the door, had one foot on the ground and the other one still in the car when the Cadillac pulled right up beside him and stopped again. They opened fire. Buford said he was hit in the chin and that he fell to the floorboard. He said Pauline was hit a second time in the head and this shot killed her. Now, he wasn't sure how long he laid there in the floorboard. It was a kind of an undetermined amount of time, but when he kind of came to, he reached up, grabbed the steering wheel, pulled himself back up behind the steering wheel, and when he looked over to his left, the Cadillac was still sitting there with the gun protruding out the window. He reached out, he said, and grabbed the barrel of the rifle. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I've shot a gun a lot of times, and anytime you shoot a pretty high-powered rifle, 15 to 17 times, that barrel is going to get hot, making it questionable about whether or not Buford could have held on to that gun barrel. But he said he did up until the time that they drove away. And then he sat there with his chin dangling down to his chest, although photographs don't verify that. Now, another thing I find terribly troubling about his story is that by this time he was telling people that he was ambushed by people associated with the Dixie Mafia. Now, these were hardened criminals. I mean, murder was just a game for them. Now, can you imagine that they would pull up beside him, shoot both he and Pauline? He goes to the floorboard and lays there, and that they just sat there and didn't do anything? You would think that whoever it was that was doing the shooting would have got out of the car and finished him off for sure. If you're enjoying this video, please give us a like, and we ask that you please leave your questions and comments. Do you think that Buford had anything to do with Pauline's death? Do you have any information that might counter what we've had to say here? Please leave it in the comments section. Now, Buford would claim that when he was to himself a little bit more, he looked over, he realized that Pauline was dead. So he drove down New Hope Road to Highway 45. Now, the strange thing is, he needed medical assistance, but instead of turning south toward Corinth, where a hospital was close by, he turned north and headed toward Selmer. But he only made it to Eastview, to Alan McCoy's store, where he stopped. Now, somewhere along the way, he made a radio call that was intercepted by Selmer Chief Hugh Kirkpatrick. Now, it was around 6:10 when Chief Kirkpatrick heard the radio call go out. He knew Buford was in trouble, he said, so he headed south toward the state line on 45. He found Buford around 6:20. So you have to wonder. TBI's Warren Jones and McNairy County Chief Deputy Jim Moffitt established the ambush time as being about 4:45, but Buford isn't found until 6:20. That's an hour and a half. He had a very, very serious wound to his chin, one where he could bleed out. So, what was he doing for an hour and a half? Where were he and Pauline? This makes me doubt that he could have been shot around 4:45. It would be closer to that 6:10 mark, or should be. So, in summary, what does all this mean? It means that no fewer than 7 people had interactions with either Buford or Pauline or both during the last couple of hours of her life. You consider all these things, the fact that we've established a motive, we've established a means, and now we've established an opportunity. And yet there are people out there that still don't want to believe that Buford may have been the person that actually took Pauline's life. I mean, all I'm doing is following the evidence. You look at the autopsy report, and the fact that one was done, I appreciate. It can reveal some information. But let's say that by some weird chance it does come back as being inconclusive. Does that change anything? Does it change all of this other information that you've just heard? Granted, the autopsy could provide some valuable information to us, uh, trajectories of the shot or shots that hit her. I say shots because Buford claimed there were two. So, what will we find there? What will we find as far as the trajectory? Will we find any type of defensive wounds on her body? She was allegedly well preserved, being as she was in her casket, which was sealed in a cement vault before burial. All I'm trying to say is don't put everything on the autopsy report. That is just a small factor in the overall investigation. We haven't even discussed the witnesses that they have now that were not available, found, or for whatever reason were never asked to give a statement about what they saw, what they heard. Nobody bothered to contact Levon Plunk and ask her to give a statement. Nobody asked Ward Moore to give a statement. No one asked Dennis Hathcock or Johnny to give a statement. No one looked up Shirley Smith or Barbara Bivens and asked them to give a statement about what they heard at the Old Hickory Grill that night. All these people that are there, Diane, look at what she saw, look at what she told people. It's weird that everybody wants to hang everything on the autopsy report. Like I say, I am so glad that they did the autopsy. But that's not by far the entire investigation. So there's more witnesses that they've interviewed. There's more things that they've had to look at. Uh, Hopefully, the TBI has done a time and motion study of their own, just as I did, to see if it was possible for Buford's story about the ambush to be true. I think there's a lot of things there that a lot of people aren't considering. And what amazes me most is all the Pusser supporters who continue to say, well, you don't know, you had to be here. And if you didn't live it, you have no clue. Well, I can put two and two together and get four. I can look at evidence and come to a conclusion. Now, I'm not saying that Buford murdered her. I'm just saying that there is a lot of possibility that he did, that he should have been looked at as a suspect. So, friends, just keep all this in mind. And Shouldn't be a lot longer until the autopsy report, the investigation is completed. I've heard all sorts of times being bantied around out there, but like I've said in previous videos, it takes time to do these things. It's not easy. The investigators that are working this today, some of them probably weren't even born back then. So they've had to acquaint themselves with the old file, get up to speed. They've had to look at new evidence, use new techniques that weren't available back then. Uh, it's like starting all over. So please be patient and bear with everyone that's involved in doing this. At any rate, there you have it. What it would mean if the autopsy report turns out to be inconclusive. It's not going to change any of this other stuff that I've brought up. So, folks, just remember the truth has no agenda, and we'll see you on Saturday for another episode. Thanks.